Hello guys. So today let us revise the Constitution of India. As we know, Constitution of India was adopted on 26th of November 1949 by the Constituent Assembly of India. But it came into effect on 26th of January 1950, and 26th of January is thus celebrated as Republic Day of India. So it took total 2 years, 11 months and 18 days for the Constitution to be written. 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. So for the formation of Constitution of India, there was a group of people organized as Constituent Assembly, which happened in the year 1946. A Constituent Assembly was formed to write down the Constitution of India. Even though the Constituent Assembly was formed in 1946, still the demand for freedom of India, or the revolt against Britishers, had started long back, which was in 1857. The revolt of 1857. And in the 1858, there were certain development of democratic institutions and awareness about rights of the citizens by 1858. After that, after 1858, the Indian Council Act 1861 came into effect. Then Indian Council Act 1892, Indian Council Act 1909, and Government of India Act 1919. Several others also came later, but we have to move forward from 1919. So after 1919, Government of India Act 1919, there was a Nehru report, which was prepared by Motilal Nehru in 1928, and it was the first major attempt by the Indians to draft a constitution for themselves. In 1828, the first attempt for a constitution was made, but it took a long way till 1949 to be written officially, written and adopted officially. So 1928 to 49, approx 21 years it took. Nehru report demanded for Nehru report is also called Swaraj Samvidhan, and it was written by Motilal Nehru. If we hear Nehru report, it first comes to my mind that it should be Jawaharlal Nehru. It should be prepared by Jawaharlal Nehru, but that is wrong. The right thing is Nehru report was prepared by Motilal Nehru, who was the father of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Then after, in 1934, M.N. Roy proposed the idea of Constituent Assembly. So if we are asking in the exam that idea of Constituent Assembly was proposed by whom, so it was M.N. Roy. Then this demand for formation of Constituent Assembly was taken up by Indian National Congress in the year 1935 as an official demand. The idea was proposed by M.N. Roy in 34, but it took 1 year for National Congress to accept it as official demand and propose it further in front of the British government. Then after, in 1938, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru demanded that the Constitution of Free India should be made by a Constituent Assembly elected on the basis of adult suffrage without any outside interference. From outside interference, he means that if we are going to form the Constitution of India, then there should be no involvement of the Britishers in that. Only the Indian leaders should be allowed to take part in the writing of the Indian Constitution. So initially, the British officials opposed the demand for Constituent Assembly. They were not in favor of Constituent Assembly. They did not wanted India to have their own constitution. But due to World War II and liberal government coming in power in the Britain, the circumstances changed in favor of Constituent Assembly. So ultimately, the Britishers had to accept that yes, the Indians can have a Constituent Assembly for writing their own constitution. So the demand was accepted in 1940 by the British government. So you can see that the idea was proposed in 1934 to constitute an assembly, and it was accepted in 1946 years it took for the British government to accept the demand for Constituent Assembly. Now coming to the formation and structure of the Constituent Assembly. So on 8th August 1940, the Britishers accepted demand for a Constituent Assembly in the August offer of 1940. August offer came in August 1940. It was asked in the some exam, civil services exam, that August offer arrange it in the order, like there were certain events, and August offer was one of them. So there was one more event which happened in 1940, but I did not remember it clearly that August offer was on 8th August. So August offer was granted by Viceroy Lord Linlithgow. After the August offer of 1940, the Cripps mission came to India from Britain under Sir Stafford Cripps in 1942. Sir Stafford Cripps brought the Cripps mission to India in 1942. The Indian National Congress and the Muslim League both rejected the recommendations of Cripps mission 1942. Both of these two major parties in the Indian politics at that time, they rejected the Cripps mission of 1942. Indian National Congress opposed the dominion status. The idea of dominion status, which was proposed in Cripps mission, was not accepted by Indian National Congress. According to the dominion status, it was said that by the Britishers that okay, we will free India, they can have their own government, but still we will be the supervisors. Like British Crown will be the head of the Indian government. So it will be a dominion state, not an independent state. India will be a dominion state. So this idea was discarded by Indian National Congress. Whereas the Muslim League demanded for two different constituent assemblies, one for the other religions and one for separately for Muslims, so that the Muslims can propose their own recommendations for the constitution. And it also demanded the autonomous states, whereas Cripps mission was agreed to grant just one constituent assembly. So this is the reason why Muslim League was also not happy with the Cripps mission. After 1942, another major event happened, which was Cabinet Mission 1946. Cabinet Mission 1946. The Cabinet Mission came to India in 1946 to discuss the transfer of power with the Indian politicians. So when Cripps mission, August mission, these two missions failed, then Britishers somehow got to know that Indians are not going to remain silent anymore, and we have to free India. So they started to cooperate with the Indian politicians, and so they brought a cabinet mission in 1956, and they wanted to discuss the transfer of power to the Indian people. Cabinet mission had 3 members: Lord Patrick Lawrence, Sir Stafford Cripps, Mr. A.V. Alexander. For exam point of view, we can remember it as Lawrence, Cripps and Alexander. Lawrence, Cripps and Alexander. These 3 Britishers are related to the cabinet mission. Lawrence, Cripps and Alexander. Lawrence, Cripps and Alexander. So I'm also revising with you. This is my idea that while revising alone, I can also dictate something so that it can be helpful to any beginner. According to cabinet mission, the Constituent Assembly was formed and the seats in the assembly was provided on basis of population of the provinces and princely states. So during that time, there were 2 types of states inside India. Some were called provinces and others were the princely states. So provinces were those which were under British government, and princely states were those which still had the monarchy in them. So according to cabinet mission, the Constituent Assembly was formed, and then when the question of seat allocation in the assembly came, then it was decided that those princely states and provinces having higher population will have more number of members in the Constituent Assembly. More number of seats will be provided to those states in the Constituent Assembly. And the princely states and provinces having less population will be given less number of seats in the Constituent Assembly. So 1 seat allotted on every 10 lakh people. 10 lakh population means 1 seat in Constituent Assembly. Suppose if any princely state or province have 40 lakh population, then there will be 4 seats in the Constituent Assembly for that particular state or the province. This way, the Constituent Assembly had 389 members in total. 389 members in total were there in the Constituent Assembly, out of which 296 represented the British Indian provinces and 93 represented the princely states. 296 represented British Indian provinces and British India province, and 93 represented princely states. Then after, in August 1946, what we were studying till now, it was cabinet mission. So then after cabinet mission in the August 1946, elections were conducted for the 296 seats of the Constituent Assembly. So there were too many candidates for Constituent Assembly that an election had to be conducted to select the 296 people. So out of 296, 208 seats were won by the Indian National Congress, 73 seats were won by Muslim League, and 15 seats were won by independent candidates. The members were not elected directly by the citizens, but still, despite the restricted adult franchise, the assembly had representatives from all sections of Indian society. So now we will stop here and we will begin with next topic, which is the role of Constituent Assembly in making of Indian Constitution. This we will cover in the next video. Thank you so much for being with me in the civil services preparation. Stay happy, keep learning. Jai Hind.